I'm using a 0.1mm Unipin fine liner. And you're watching me draw this house in actual drawing time. And I'm starting on this corner. I'm drawing directly in ink. There's no pencil underline, so this is a great technique demo for that as well. I put a dot where I think the angle of the roof will be, and then I check it. No, still needs to be bumped up a little bit. I don't always redraw the dot, I often just adjust then where my line goes. And notice I haven't taken my line right to the end of the building because I don't know where the end of the building is going to be yet. It's more accurate for me to measure in the distance the doorway is from that corner, and also now to work out the height of the doorway. And I do that by checking the distance from the top of the doorway to the roof. So I position the doorway and I pay attention to how much of this width is actually the depth of the wall, because that can be a bit misleading. So now I put a little bit of the garden in because that is a line I need, but I can't get a sharp line there as I can for the roof. But I still need to have an approximate line running, if you like, through the lower part of that foliage. And notice I use dotted lines to give myself an idea of where that might be. I don't want a solid line because it may not be quite right, but those marks I can hide when I do a bit of hatching for those shrubs. So now I do this large window, and again I'm looking at the distance between the window and the door. And I've also noticed that it goes up higher than the doorway. It's closer to the guttering. Again, I pay attention to how much of the width is actually the depth of the wall that we see on the left-hand side because of the angle. Please hit the like button if you're finding this interesting. And if you want to have a go drawing this yourself, there is a link in the video description that will take you to this image on my post page. And it's there for you to have a go drawing this yourself. Now, again, I'm measuring the distance between that large window and the smaller one to the left, and I'm noticing it's about double the width of the gap between the center window and the door. But I've probably got that section a little bit wider than in the photo, so I have to allow for that in my drawing, which is going to be slightly larger at the end than the photo. The important thing is to keep the proportions correct. And I also notice at the top of this smaller window lines up on a perspective angle with the top of the doorway. So that was a good thing to notice, because that helps me now position the height. And then I decided not to draw the telegraph pole because I wanted to keep this demo simple. And again, I looked at the distance between the left side of that last window and the corner. Now I look at the height of the pitch of this roof, and it's just slightly to the left of the corner. So I put a dot and I put that line, but it's looking at it now, I can see that it goes up too high. And when I put the dot for the other pitch of the roof, I can see that now if I use that line to the end, it's going to be too high. So I make a correction, and I'm just going to let that line hang in space a little bit, because I'm not producing an artwork, I'm practicing my drawing. And it's better that I compromise perfection but get it right, because I know that's the way I learn. And I know next time I do this, I will, not necessarily this drawing, but the next time I estimate the pitch roof, I'll pay a little more attention to possibly going too high. So now I'm doing the same thing with the angle off to the side, on the right hand side of that angle. Now I'm not expecting that these will be the final lines for my building. I am drawing deliberately lightly because I can't erase anything, and so I want to leave myself the option to create a certain feel a bit later by adding more ink on top of some parts, particularly the closer parts or the parts that are in more shadow. So I'm not trying to outline the house at this stage. I'm deliberately going light, and then I will create variation in my final lines and marks to add more interest to the house. So particularly pay attention to that. So I am holding my pen very loosely. I'm holding it halfway back along the barrel, and I'm moving from my whole arm for nice, light, crisp movements and therefore ink flow onto the paper. So there's this side fence, and there's a window that peaks above. Took that window a little far to the right, and it's always good to pay attention when we do that because it reminds us to be even sharper in our focus next time. Now, I do slide this paper across in a moment. I'm sorry that I just hadn't noticed that it was going off again. You see, the first line was, well, in some ways it was probably more correct. I am deliberately trying to keep this drawing happening at a reasonably fast pace. And I also put this chimney at this point a little bit too high on the roof. It's not something that will be particularly noticeable in my drawing, but again, as someone learning to improve their drawing, I pay attention to it as something to pay more attention to next time. So you've been watching this all in real time up till now. In a moment, I'm going to do hatching for those trees in the background. And I speed that up to double time simply because it's a lot of repetitive line work. And I wanted to keep this video quite short. But if you want to, you can use the cog icon to slow this down to half speed, and you'll watch me do that part at actual speed. And gosh, I could have cut that bit out complete. I don't know what I was doing there. So now I'm coming back and adding additional marks and lines over the top now to get my final appearance for this cottage. Because if I do just a heavy line, if I just trace over all these lines as they are, I will get a very cartoon-like effect, because that's how we draw cartoons, with a very even continuous line that goes around the subject and the details of the subject. So I deliberately want to have some parts that feel darker and thicker and some parts that feel lighter and thinner, even parts where it's almost like there's no ink in the line at all, because that creates more how things look in life, which is what I'm after. Now you're still seeing this actual time. I drew the house itself in about 8 3/4 minutes was the actual total house drawing time. So it's a great subject, this little house, or something similar. If we don't have a great deal of time, I probably could have taken an extra 2 minutes and maybe observed a little bit better. There are, as far as I can see, wooden palings on this fence, but the white paint tends to obscure the detail. So now I go heavier to get the color of the gutter in, and I go, whoops, that was not very good, was it? So now I make it a little bit heavier than I would have, but I feel that that's a good compromise given that awful line that I put not where I planned it to put. What I learned though, drawing directly in ink and not being able to erase, is that most of the time the lines that perhaps aren't where I'd like them to be, I can hide the impact of that or lessen the impact of that. And we don't learn these skills if we draw in pencil and can just erase everything that's not perfect. I found when I was doing that, as my drawing improved, my perfectionism got worse, and I was erasing more and more, ironically, the better I became at drawing. Whereas switching straight to pen meant that I had to really learn to incorporate every mark I put on the paper into my finished drawing. And that was a really, really valuable skill that I couldn't have learned any other way. And I just find a greater freedom now drawing in pen for that matter. So we are double speed now. And this is a great little tip. Use a scrap of old paper to give yourself a nice, clean, sharp edge when that's what we want in a place where we're hatching. Notice I'm very, if you like, rough in drawing these trees. I don't want to draw a lot of detail because that will make us pay attention to them too much. I want them dark because the values of the house, the lights and darks of the house are very light, and they do help pop the house forward, make it feel as if it's coming towards us, but also simply highlight the house. But I keep the detail very loose so as not to draw too much attention. Now notice I didn't do particularly straight, even lines for the pathway and for the driveway. But again, I find that vary in my marks, and particularly having them lighter and perhaps more irregular when they're further away, and also having gaps even, is a great way of capturing the effect of that edged grass there. What do you think? G'day, I'm Stephen Travis. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I have quite a lot of playlists that will help you navigate all the videos on my channel to find the ones that are most suitable for where you're at in your drawing and where you would like to be. And remember, there's a link to this reference photo in the video description, so why not go to it and have a go drawing this yourself. But remember, however it turns out, whatever you try to do, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.